Hello, and welcome to my channel. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and today I've got another book review for you. But before I get into that book review, make sure you are liking, subscribing, and hitting that bell notification so you can get regular updates for when I put out new content. I post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And that said, guys, today's book review is going to be Breach of Peace by Mr. Daniel B. Greene. If you don't know who Daniel is, he is arguably one of the biggest fantasy booktubers on the platform. He has got just such a good, large following that I am a little behind on doing this review. But I finally got the book read, and I do want to give my thoughts on Breach of Peace. Now that said, I'm going to go right up in front and give my rating for it. This was a solid 3 out of 5 or a 6 out of 10. It wasn't amazing, but I didn't dislike it. It was just kind of was good for a first entry. Now initially, I wasn't really going to do this review simply because there are just so many reviews that dropped when the book first came out. And then today, I was talking with my buddy Chaz and Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative. Chaz dropped his review today, which I'll go ahead and link his review down below. And I was chatting in their comments section, and I realized that I did have opinions that I wanted to talk about. Because, you know, as a kind of first foray into the world of fantasy, Breach of Peace is a very interesting kind of case study here. Now, what is Breach of Peace about? Well, it is set in a high fantasy world where essentially God came down to Earth and has started elevating technology and taken a firm hand on this world and the way that it is being developed. He passes along technology and development. He controls the way structure and society works. He has elevated certain people called, I believe they are called the Ascended. And he has empowered the police force and the government and the military to really kind of control the people here. And so that's kind of the world we are living in. And this isn't a super long book, so we don't really get to see a whole lot of the world. We really only get to see 3 locations with any given. I mean, it's I think 90 to 120 pages. It was like a 3 or 4 hour read for me. But we are following 3 police inspectors. I believe is their rank. One is a high inspector, and then yeah. So we've got I could be pronouncing this wrong. It's Khalid, her husband Samuel, and then another inspector by the name of Chapman. And the way the book starts is they have been called to a noble household to witness the brutal, or to try and solve and figure out the brutal murder of this family. And that's kind of where we start out. Essentially just Sam and Khalid show up, and then they run into Chapman, who was already on site but wasn't really supposed to be working the case. And from there, we kind of go through the story. Now, as far as that, I'm not really going to go into much further detail than that. Really, I want to talk about how I felt the book performed and if it accomplished what I think it was trying to accomplish. And let's start with what I really liked, because I always want to start positive here. What I really liked is the authorial voice shines through. And what I mean by that is, if you watch any of Daniel's content, he is very energetic and kind of chaotic and all over the place. And but in the end, he delivers you a quality experience. And it really works. And a lot of that comes through on the pages of Breach of Peace. You can definitely tell, if you do watch his content and you read what's on the page, you can tell it's Daniel who's telling you the story. And I really, really enjoyed that. I also love the concept here. It is fascinating to see the police empowered in such a way. And, well, I know there's a whole argument that's not what this is about. But from a fantasy world perspective, to see this kind of world, you know, we've seen it in, some other places, such as, the Mistborn saga does something serious, similar to this. You've got the what was it? I'm gonna call him the Emperor. It's been 4 years since I've read, but you'll know who I'm talking about in the Final Empire. And then he's got kind of all the people who control the peons, and that's kind of what the police force has been turned into here in Breach of Peace, which I thought was really cool. Then you've kind of got your different levels of government, and your ascendants and everything of that, or ascendant or chosen. I forget which one. I think it's ascendant. But that said, that comes through really well. I love the unique societal structure, which is so jarring and polarizing from our own. I did like that from a purely fantasy standpoint. I did like the rivalry between the three inspectors. I thought that was really well done. The way that they don't quite mesh and they kind of grind into each other, I did enjoy that. There are certain things, though, that did kind of bother me. This was supposed to be a fantasy novel, and I don't know if that quite hit the mark, because even though it's like, God came down to Earth, I honestly, in my brain, can see this being a Star Trek episode, where basically a civilized individual has come down to Earth and just started disseminating technology that is far above a primitive people, and these people worship that person as a god. And I don't know if that's what Daniel's going for, or if that's just my brain making this connection, but this could easily turn into a dark sci-fi novel. Another thing that didn't quite click with me was that it was sold to me as being this very dark novel. And I think the term dark and gruesome are being intermixed here. And for example, I would like to reference that I don't consider Hostel or Saw to be horror movies. I consider them to be gore movies. They're supposed to gross you out and kind of just horrify you in that sort of way. Versus where you got your suspense and really scary movies like Nightmare on Elm Street, where don't fall asleep, or your slashers like Halloween, or your Friday the 13th and Chucky and all those. This felt more gross and gory than dark. Specifically, we're talking about the murder scenes and just general things of that nature. What this book did remind me of was some really good books. And honestly, I hope Daniel has read these or chooses to read them for research material. Specifically because the book has a very noir feel to it almost. I think it's supposed to have a little bit of a noir feel. And I know he's read Greenbone Saga, which is kind of Chinese noir, gangster, things like that. But then Larry Correia does the Grim Noir Chronicles, which I think would be fantastic. It tells a low fantasy story with a great noir feel, and I didn't really get the noirness. That tone didn't really quite shine through here in Breach of Peace. So I think some really good parallels could be drawn from there, and some inspiration, should he ever watch my video, which the chances are big. That said, the characterization was a bit wish-washy. Specifically, Khalid's a magical smoker. She pulls like magic tricks with cigarettes. They just kind of poof, appear in her hand. She doesn't know that she's pulled a cigarette and lit it, and it happens like 3 or 4 times in like a span of like 30 minutes. So it's a little bit too much. That could have been trimmed out a little bit. Additionally, she's supposed to be this highly ranked, severely trained, or just really well trained police inspector, but she's got this weird fear of the dark out of nowhere. I didn't feel that jived quite well with the character we were being presented with. Her husband doesn't really have a huge impact on the story. It's more her and Chapman. And to the point where I just forgot the character's name again. I'd actually have to look it up. But my biggest kind of gripe here with Breach of Peace was it felt like a story that was wearing a corset or a straitjacket. It felt very constrained, like it just couldn't quite take a full breath. And I think that comes down to the novella structure of the book, specifically just page length. Honestly, Daniel has a great story concept here that could easily have been double the length. If that story had been just allowed to breathe a little bit and flesh itself out, it would have still been a relatively short book. 240 to 180 pages, depending on... I read the ebook version, so I'm not entirely sure of the page count. But if it had just had that room to breathe and flesh things out, we could have gotten better character motivations. Basically, we've got this novel-length plot that's been just smushed into this small page count. And so a lot of times stuff just kind of feels rushed or told in one single breath and one single stream of consciousness. And it just moves kind of fast without taking the time to enjoy the scenery, or really, if it's trying to like give you that grimdark feel, you're not given enough time to sit with these dark elements to really enjoy it. Another thing is, when he announced the book, it was charting as military fantasy. I don't really get that. And then the whole controversy happened, which I understand and I'm cognizant of. But one thing that I did feel was odd was that we are told throughout the majority of the book, they are this all-powerful police force, but they aren't treated that way. Only by the civilians are they treated that way. Everybody else just kind of all over these people. When they're in public, they can kind of do whatever they want unless they're dealing with the government or they're dealing with the direct chosen ones of the god. So anything like that doesn't really push forward. Now, I did enjoy this book, but again, when I was talking with Leslie and Chaz, it came up that Leslie seemed to think the book wasn't quite fantasy. Specifically, if it had been pitched as, say, a horror book or something like that, where it really embraces these kind of elements, that may have worked better to up my enjoyment. Because when I went into the book, I was expecting a little more fantasy than just, there's a god in this world. We don't really get to see that. So that said, I did give this a 3 out of 5. Or depending on your scale, a 6 out of 10. You just multiply it by 2. It's the same rating. But I do look forward to the second release. I do want to see if Daniel grows as an author and embraces everything so that we can kind of get a better understanding of this world and story that he is trying to tell. That said, guys, let me know in the comments down below if you think I'm wrong, what you agree, what you don't disagree. I kind of want to know what everybody's thoughts are. Or you can always just check the description down below for the link to the Wizardly Duo Discord and drop in and talk to me about your thoughts on Breach of Peace. That said, guys, stay magical. Peace out. Bye.